morning to all of you, and I welcome you to the second session of our Accelerate Leadership Series. Today we have with us CEO of CRAI, Ms. Pooja Marwah. CRAI. An organization we all know. So first of all, I'd like to call on Ananya to please welcome Ms. Marwah. Okay. So I'm already sweating now and I can see the attendance. Let me ask you a few questions. How's the preparation for our exam today? Going okay? Ethics? Marketing? I'm asking this because for next 40 minutes or so when we are in this session, all these questions are irrelevant. I want you to focus on being present here. Okay? Because when you're present here, you'll not miss a lot of things. Yesterday morning, I was trying to invite a faculty to be present here, and the faculty agreed. He agreed and he asked for this. He said, "Shall appreciate if I could meet Ms. Marwah right after the talk and the lecture venue itself." And yours truly, he was very present, too many things to do. This is what I replied. After being told what the location was, this was my answer, because I was not present, I just missed it. And so, pressure बहुत नहीं चल रहा है ना? अगर चल भी रहा हो तो for just next 40 minutes, hold on. And now I invite the faculty because he himself is here. I call on Manish Sehgal sir, Professor Manish Sehgal, here on the stage, please. Please welcome him. Good to see everyone here. Am I audible even otherwise? Yes, sir. Okay? And these guys have been through my course for the last 12 months. So it's a great pleasure to welcome you here. Accelerate as an institute is known for its social conscience. So while we provide corporate leaders as well, we provide leaders who have that social conscience and determined to make a difference in the society. And therefore, to that end, it gives us great pleasure to welcome Ms. Marwah here, who has been heading the Child Rights and Youth. Previously, Child Relief and Youth, but now more about Child Rights and Youth. So to the campus. So we were just discussing that on the ground floor before we came here, and she was saying as to how the move came about, and therefore how CRAI realized over 2 years of introspection as to how we can no longer depend only upon the child relief part, because that is temporary, but how can we engage with the state itself, and how can we empower the community to be able to look at one's rights and to make a sustainable change. So Ms. Marwah here, who understands that fairly well, she is the CEO and has also trained from Jesuit Institute, XISS Ranchi itself, okay, and has been with CRAI since 1994. She made the switch from the corporate to the social sector quite early in her career. For the last 18 years, Ms. Pooja has helped build an organizational framework for CRAI that best captures the essence of justice and equity. So please welcome Ms. Marwah.
I think I'm going to change this to 0. Good morning. I'm going to take try to figure out stack. Okay. So let me first say how thrilled I am actually to be here. As Rashwari kindly said, my started my education in a Jesuit institution, and I often actually credit the fact that I am where I am today to that institution. And I think that is what, when I was thinking about what do I share with all you all want. There's nobody here who doesn't know what it looks like out there. Which actually was not true of me when I did my post-graduation. And it's very easy to say, we must look at why we live our lives. But it is far more difficult to practice and work when you actually live it. It's easy to say, I must, it's easy for me to say, look at me, I'm like this Mother Teresa who gave up my, corporate job, but I'm not. I always say this is and has been, for me, one of the most selfish things that I've ever done. It's one of the things that I have actually undone for myself. Not for a role, not for a family, not for anybody, but really for what it makes or gives to me. It's something that it helped me, or I have begun to shape my life the way I would like it to be. Still too early to say whether it will get there, but one sort of hope. So really, I thought that today we need to talk about how, I just want to share with you how many different ways people live their lives. I met this very interesting woman from the US, and she spearheads a movement that is all about conservation. And one of the really interesting things that she said to me, which stayed with me for life, is that really we live with 24 hours every day. Yeah. What do we want to make of this life? Of that, there are 14 hours of waking, active, rajasic activity. What should be the purpose of that activity? Is that something that we want to think about? The purpose can be, it can be to say, I need to sustain myself. And yet sustaining itself can have many different ways. I can sustain myself with a BMW, and I can still sustain myself with a mother. It's a how you're going to sort of define it. And to me that is really something that I wake up seeing every day, thanks to having joined club, thanks to being fortunate enough in my life space to be in a place where I meet every day so many people who actually made a choice about how their life hours are going to be spent. I always think that when I joined, in spite of a very short corporate career, I was very cynical. I got into that space of saying people do things for themselves and really, everything is about me, myself. And fortunately for me, the last 20 years have broken that big time. Because the minute I meet somebody who's out there, he might have been a Dalit himself, he might have led a hugely deprived life himself, and yet, he's broken up, he's got educated. One would think, and cynically one would say, he also, let me float off somewhere and do my own thing and forget about people, and yet he makes that choice to go back to his career, to try and make that same change happen with people. So to me, that's the cue. I don't care about whether he is fancy, can he make fabulous presentations. He often comes. And yet true leadership, to my mind, is actually there. It is far more to be found in each village in India, in my experience than it is to be in some of the really fancy boardrooms and some of the really fancy designations that the people with designations that I have met. And often I feel like when I need that energy in a corporate boardroom, I wish some of it could, come back to where it's really, really sort of needed. So I thought today I'll just share with you a few lives as I've seen them. Great. So when I look at the whole issue of to be, is what you can choose to live your life in many different ways, and we all do. Like I said, I've been blessed. This is not okay. Ooh, I hate technology. And I thought so, but it didn't work, and then I was like, okay. So there are different things that you find that you will, and I'm sure a lot of you already done it. I met someone at breakfast who said he's already been volunteering at Drive when he was in college. Many of you may have volunteered in different places. Many of you may have chosen to do something in your own home space. But really, what is living about? It is to learn, it is to find meaning in what you do. Most importantly to me, actually, is to not take for granted whatever you learned or inherited. Whether they were overt prejudices, or they were attitudes, or they were things you heard your parents say. I think that life will not be lived until you are willing to question, ask, experiment, and change all. Personally for me, I remember I've come from a partition family. And I remember being brought up in a household where there were vague anti-Muslim sentiments. And then one day, I woke up and said, oh, hello, what is this? How they should, maybe I'm carrying it. Can I ask myself that question of, do I carry it? Or do I continue to live with it and say, but my mom said it must be there? So life is really going to be about digging and tearing apart and deciding what you keep and what you don't keep. And what new thing you create for yourself. Life is not about saying, acha nahi, that is the correct thing. Or to get, now I think frankly, you guys are far more susceptible to rumors than we were. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have rubbish rumors about, XYZ killed someone over there. I remember recently seeing a picture, very interesting. There's a group of Jawans making a human bridge. You can see it's army, and there's some people walking over, vaguely Middle Asian looking. And there's a person who's saying, no, the people of JNK are not grateful to the Indian army. And someone else posted saying, this is a picture of soldiers in China. This has nothing to do with the JNK disaster. So really, how do you choose to live your life? What information will you look at, not look at? How you will weigh it. To me, that is really what you need to do. And I come shortly to the founder of GRIVE, who woke up one day and said, the children are not going to be, I'm not going to allow Indian children to live like this. Yesterday we were in the train and there was a child, still, it's ridiculous. More than 60 years of independence, and there are small 6-year-old children sweeping our trains, and we take it for granted. Like, वो क्या करे, वो तो बड़ा बेचारा poor है ना, कुछ तो काम कर रहा है. So do we question that? Do we say to ourselves, would I want that for my child? Am I okay with that? So it really, to me, it is about that, about saying, should we change? Should we question? Should we constantly look at every assumption and ask ourselves of its holes? Is it okay for me? saying any of us needs to become, anybody. But really to live my life the way I think is right, the way it needs to be lived. So, we were thinking about what do we do, and we said, let's share a vignette of stories. People we've met in our work. And there are obviously 100 other people, and I'm very chatty, so I can sort of talk about them forever. But I thought we'd pick some people who we found extraordinary. So, this young boy who was an IIT Kharagpur, spent 4 years volunteering, which was fine. And one day, after 4 years, said, you know what? And he's not a particularly, you must meet him, he's not a particularly strong, athletic, happening kind of guy. But he said one day, look, I am going to cycle from Kharagpur to Bombay and raise awareness for children. And he was not, and I think what struck me when I met him was that he was very clear. He said, I believe, and this is what I found so interesting. When we look around us in this country, how can you be sensitive, how can you be insensitive to what is around? Every opportunity that I get, I will look around and say, there are so many people who are not getting this opportunity. How can I be okay with it? And like I say, I talk about exercises a lot because, not because of the academic effort. I didn't listen, I think. Not because of what I learned in labor law or HR or OB, but really the one thing they did was, they forced on us a subject called social justice and social action. 2 credits, whatever. And we were thinking, so HR, we should be able to learn this shit. And we cribbed. And then we had to volunteer one semester. And we cribbed. And yet, I think what that did to us as human beings was just to open our eyes to say, you know what? 15 kilometers from Ranchi, there is a village where there is no road, where people have nothing to eat, where the biggest dream of this little old lady, I always remember, I said, Mercy, my broken Saratri, I don't know Saratri, she didn't know Hindi. I said, Mercy, kya karna hai aapko? She said, ek bari na, ek to bus dekhe. Her dream in life was to see a bus. And this was, as the bird flies 15 kilometers from Ranchi, was actually unacceptable. Most people there slept having a glass of mahua or beer. Not because of alcoholics, as we like to think, but because they were damn hungry. And if you had that alcohol, you would feel hungry. And it was unimaginable, actually, for someone like me who's been brought up in a very northernized, very secluded, I've lived in one of these Jamshedpur type steel colonies, right? So you thought the whole world was sanitized and had underground drains and all was there in the world. And I think that is what really tells you that we should not be okay with it. We should not be sitting there saying, no, we must all be positive. The nation needs us to be, yes, the nation needs us to be positive and find solutions. The nation also needs us to be really angry about what is happening to 50% of our children. And so here this ordinary young man said, let me push myself, let me train, let me make myself strong enough for certain. Thing with these new technologies, and that's how this came about. And his classmates said, what is this? Any other work, focus on your placement, focus on your CGPI, why are we doing this? I mean, the whole thought was, can I use myself? Can I use what I have to make a point? And I see this across the world. I see it in our America volunteers. absolutely crazy things they do. And they put themselves out there and say, I will do this. I will climb base camp Everest. You guys give me money for every kilometer that I come. You know, we had one guy who was really cute. He said, just like me, a little bit overweight. Little bit. And he said, I will, you guys sponsor every kilo I lose. You know, and he was in British Airways or something, he got his colleagues to, you know, sponsor money for every kg he lost. And then he made so much money that he said, now let me put on a little weight again, so I can do it again. You know that, it's a funny example, but it's quite, you know, it's about saying, how do I, what I call, you know, and I've met increasingly people in the sector who I say, you know, there are some of us who play safe. You know, I say, I have a lot of people joining, try to look at me sometimes, and I used to look at the people who I reported to when I joined Try, and I say, you scare me. You know, how can I have this much of, no, I can't give 100% of myself to you. You know, I have other things to do. And this frightens me, this whole sort of, you know, I am the source of power. I plug myself into that machine. I am the generator. I personally am become that source of electricity, so to speak. And I see amazing, I met a young schizophrenic recently who has chosen to do work for other schizophrenic children. Because, you know, it hits you between 14 and 18. And the kind of work, I mean, it is so much this person, and I was so worried for her. I was like, look after yourself, you know, you are going to burn out. And there was no thought of it. It was like, I have to help other people like myself. Especially in underprivileged communities, mental illness is just, it has no place. Absolutely, it's not accepted, it's not, you know, you can't be ill. Come on, you know, get on with your life, you know. More than anyone else, I think we as Indians deny the existence. We say, Arey, tum sad kyun ho? Arey, poor guy, if he was able to be happy, he would be, you know. Because obviously there is a problem that he is not able to do. So I think really about sort of, and that's what I love the example of culture. I love the example of this girl, Shaila was talking about. You see people who sort of plug themselves in and say, okay, I'm not Bill Gates. I don't have money. But I have me. I have what I can do. You know, and he cycled, and what we did was he created it into an event. He took pictures of children in labor, he posted, he interacted with communities, and it was fabulous. I mean, for us it was just inspiring to watch him sort of do that across the country. And really this was even, and to me this ties back so in so many ways to what organizations like ours do. You know, there is no bound to human protection. You know, I can say to myself, "Kiji, itna hi hoga." But you know what? You will find that you will suddenly be able to do so much more. So my finance head the other day was telling me, he said, you know, you ask me very uncomfortable questions. They're very unprofessional. You know, you ask me these very basic, no, but this doesn't add up, so. And then we find something that is really a problem sometimes, right? If this and this doesn't add up, this thing is not profitable. So why should we keep doing it, for example? And I'm thinking of a girl who finished her master's with a financial, you know, my finance accounting professor told me, said, madam, you don't deserve to pass. But I thought I should take PT, so you can get your post-graduation. I'll give you 40. You know, and someone had told me I'm even capable of looking at financials, I would have laughed at them. I said, are you crazy? You know, my mind shuts down. And yet when I came to try and I said, oh, they said, oh, you have a budget. I said, why? And they said, you know, in try we are accountable for every paisa. And if you are going to make X trip, like if I have to make this trip, I have 50 accountants asking me across the country. And once a budget है? So I said, actually nahi hai. ठीक है, then we put it in unbudgeted. Because if, you basically saying you don't have to plan your life. And I really feel that that is a strength. Yeah? We raise money in the name of children. This is public money. And we have to be accountable. And that's what teaches you to stretch that limit. And before you know it, you are able to do what you thought you could never do. And that is really, I think it's about, if your central purpose becomes something that is worth spending your life, like as Eva said so evocatively, then you will find a way to do it. And if it's not, you won't. You'll keep saying X problem, B problem, that one went wrong, that something happened, It's very simple to externalize. I can say I failed in finance. So why should I do this? I have no excuse to not do it. I cannot walk up to my board of trustees and say, "Okay, I'm sorry." Because people often ask me, they say, people in cry talk a little like corporate time. So I'm like, why? You say the word profit, you say the word business, you use the word money. And I'm like, do you realize money is the veins on which all of this runs? If I don't raise money, I don't do the work. If I go off and do stuff that is not profitable for me, if I don't ask myself the hard questions, it's children's money. Right? Runs entirely. 90% of our income is donations to people like you and me. But average size of 2,500 rupees. We have a large, that's who we are. And it is your and my money that we are using. So I can't go and say, you know what, I cannot be a Kellogg's and say, 10 saal tak I will lose money so that people get used to eating cereal. I can't do it. So I think to me, that is really to say to challenge yourself and to test the limits of your own ordinariness, so to speak. I am an ordinary, I remember when I joined CRAI and the head of design there was this wonderful woman who told me, I used to be a housewife. And Ripon taught me that there was no such thing as just being a housewife. Actually had an extraordinary sense of color and design. So she would do the sourcing of art, which we would then use in our cards. And she said, I would have otherwise spent the rest of my life saying, I brought up my children and thank you very much. But here I am today saying that I've done crazy things. I have changed the lives of so many children just by applying what I have and amplifying it. I didn't need it necessarily have been X, Y, Z, but this I can do, and therefore I will give this. Another person, Archana Ravi, very different way of contributing. So what I'm just trying to say, and this was one of the dangers of a talk like that. I said the danger is to say that the only way to contribute is to plug in yourself into the source. It may not be. There are people who contribute in so many ways. They still work and they still do something else. They still have to do something for an economic living, but they write a check. To my mind, one of the most honorable acts, and there are people that will murder me to say this. Because how can you just leave them just donated? And I'm saying, Galu, it took something for that person to reach that pen and write the check. There are enough people who do not. So really honor that act. Because one of the things I was taught in CRAI when I joined was that, look, what you need to look at is contribute in your life. And that has value. So really I'm not here to say to you, give up your jobs, come and work at CRAI, go and work in X. I'm saying for those of you who can afford to do that, at some point do it. If you want to. But you don't have to. You can do it, you can work and make something work in your life in many, many ways. it is not necessarily one. So Archana, for example, is a journalist. And she worked in advertising. You know, one of those little, I don't know how many of you here have been in advertising, but you wanted to work. So one of the things you do in advertising is they treat you like a flunky. You know, you do photocopying from one end to the other. You do, and at our time, of course, we didn't have computers, right? So we would actually make these silly physical presentations for a bunch of people selling lunch. It was mindless. Yeah. And she started working and encountered us as a client. And in so many ways that changed her life. Because she would sit down and we would say, no. You know, we're not going to accept the word patron. People are not patronizing children. It's children's right. It's an inherent right to be a child. It's my right to be educated. It's my right to be everything. And we're not going to encourage. And even though it's a win. You know, have you seen? A lot of you may have seen ads recently from some international organization. I don't know why they're doing it. Which is, you know, there'll be a child and there'll be this makhi mandaraing around its head. And it is so sad and it's, you know, you have de-dignified that child so bad. You have used her misery to raise money. And I know that there's a school of thought that says so what? But I'm saying, you know what, if you're working for anybody, children, women, anyone, you don't de-dignify them. You don't use them. So for example, we live this out in trial, you will always see a story of hope. You will always see a child who has a moment, even a moment of happiness in her life. Even if she's in, you never exploit or use the communities that you sort of work for. And we will get, for advertising times, so you did this will be much faster. And there is data across the world now. If you use that kind of advertising, you get much more money. But I always call it blood money, guilt money. You know, it's that money you give at the beggar. A guy is never going to be alone other life. He's never going to come back to you. Because he was just so upset. And he said, let me get out of this. So, when we work in advertising, people, they use it. Because they say, wow, really, these people are like, no, this is not okay. It was a very picturesque image. I always think of this picturesque image of a Lambada child. Are you people familiar with the Lambada communities? They are the gypsy communities of India. And during British times, the British had this thing, right, which is from their own communities, that when the world turned into a landed place, when you started getting defined by how much land you had staked and owned, any community that refused to live in that landed way became criminal. So all nomads, gypsies, are criminal. So we had 51 tribes in India when they came who were like this, right? They were either Lambadas or they were Saperas, and you might be familiar. They're grazers. They call different names in different parts of the country. So they essentially don't have land. They live by migration. They live, for example, some of them are grazers. They follow their cattle and so on. And they all got classified as criminals. And so one of the things we did at independence was we denotified them. So I should not get into the fact that that's become another branding. But, so the Lambadas in that community, the women are very picturesque. They wear these sort of, little white bangles and have this hair done up in this complicated combs. And I realized during our work with them that actually for them it's a huge piece of bondage. And when they talk about freedom, the women say, I have told my babu that she doesn't need to wear this anymore. So we had a picture of a child, Lambada child, with all this, and advertising guy said, boss, kya picture hai, so picturesque. And we were like, you can't use it. This is a sign of bondage for this little girl. The fact that as an 8-year-old she's having to wear heavy metal combs that weigh 50 kilos, it's not picturesque. So I also think we romanticize the poor sometimes, we romanticize tribals. these are some of the things that you sort of get. And she said, I remember emerging very confused. This sort of changed her life. She ended up becoming actually a journalist now. And I don't know when, but she started actually buying, and she talks about the fact that she didn't remember when during the course of those arguments that she started buying the idea that it was better off investing into permanent change. You know, so you have changed mindsets of parents and what they would do for children. And that would be more permanent. If you revive, think about it, it's very simple. I as an NGO run a school. As long as I have money and funding, it will work. The minute I run out of money and funding, you drop it. That's it, you're out, the children are out of school. Usually you spend that same energy and money reviving the government school in that village or in that community. And the government school now runs. Tomorrow I am not there. You know, it's irrelevant. I hope that one day, you know, try to write a 30, 50 years, 30 year strategy that says we should be relevant, you know, to this country, to the children. So she's a journalist now, and anyway, so that's something that she's able to sort of do with her life. You know, so she says, like, from becoming, I would have ended up making pretty jingles for lots of soap and fairness creams. I say this because my poor husband markets fairness creams, much to my consternation. And you know, so for her, I think that is something. It's just to say, I have a worldview and I believe in it. It can be anything. Yeah, like I know that you guys are going to get tired of me saying this, but you know, it's just it could be living a life without discrimination. I may just choose to say, I will never hold a stereotype about anybody without questioning. I will never say all tribal people are X, all reservations are bad, all Muslims are, like one of my friends who retreated finally into saying, they smell. I'm like, how can you as an adult person even say or think something like this about a community? You know? So I mean, one Sardar was an idiot, and then I look at Manmohan Singh and I say, no, all Sardars are idiots, we shall make Sardar Jews. You know, it's really, it's a bit strange, isn't it? The third girl is Jennifer. She's a volunteer actually with us. And she herself faced a lot of challenges. She didn't give up. She completed her own work, her own life, had a lot of challenges. She didn't have parental care. She had to sort of fund herself through what she did, and she now works. And I think she just does this. She says she's part of one of our groups, and she says, my work is to just work with the parents and say, it looks nice. Right now your kid can earn $10 a day. But have you thought about the long term? What you're doing to this child? What you're doing to his or her future? Effectively you're shortening their lives in most cases. Right? The minute a child is doing what I call adult things, unchildlike things, you are effectively shorten everything. You sort of cut off all ways of development. And it was very, it's very interesting that people choose to, and you don't realize it. Yeah? You and I think we have very ordinary lives. And yet, you go to a village where women have not been allowed out of the parda. And they tell you, they look at they say, Dini, Guru. And you think, what am I? I'm not some Bhashan giver, and I want this inspirational life. And then all you share with them is that your father believed that your aim in life was actually to sustain yourself through work. That's it. That's all they need to hear in many cases. And you realize it's inspiration. And my aim in life is not to get married and have kids. But not to find this, boy who is, what do they say? Settled letter. But actually to say, my aim in life is to do this, and along with that, whatever happens in my personal space happens. But I have to make of this what I need to make, and for that woman to hear that is actually fairly extraordinary. And Jennifer does that really, really well. Just say, look at me, I started the same place. I could have given up, but I didn't. And you don't need to give up as well. Join me. Come and sort of make something of yourself. And allow your children to make something of themselves. Because most people will cite poverty. हम क्या करें, हमारे पास पैसे नहीं है तो बच्चों को काम पे भेज नहीं करें. And yet to offer an alternative. My own experience is that if you're even able to offer them a glimmer of hope, they will change for you. We had this story of this father in a project in Nangareddy district, that the kid was bonded into floriculture because of family debt. And this NGO that they used to support went there, and they did this concept of a summer camp. Where for some time, these parents for the first time experienced that their children were not at work. And the partner in them said, just give me 4 weeks. 4 हफ्ता तक आप अपना income give up कर दो. And at the end of that 4 weeks, when they started working with, that same father would carry his daughter 15 kilometers to the nearest school. Because he had seen that his child could be happy. She didn't have to live like this. She could be in school. So really it's about offering people small pieces of hope. And of change that is sort of possible in their lives. And I have never seen personally a more optimistic set of people than us. People say Indians are fatalistic, they believe in Kismat, X, Y, Z. But you know what? I worked in Africa, and it was so sad. They really didn't believe. In India, you give them this much, and there's a smile as broad as your, say, okay, this is possible. I can actually get a meal a day. Or my child can actually be happy. ठीक है, क्या करना बताइए? And they go off and they get out the poor district collector until he makes sure the teacher comes to the school. And they will give up a day of income and wages to do that. So I come to my favorite story of all, which is our founder's story. So in those days they used to call it flight purser, now they call it flight steward. The guy who serves you tea and coffee, that was Ripon Kapoor. So Ripon was 25 in 1979. Remember now, most of you way too young even. I suppose, I'm feeling old. The fact that I can remember 1979. 1979 India was like the basket case of the world, wasn't it? It was considered like this benighted, though interesting country where, when you finished college, you went and had a year of ganja smoking, hippiedom. But other than that, it was, more poor people than, so people in America used to be told, eat your food, or the children in India are going hungry. We were the basket case of the world, so to speak. And yet this crazy man, this man who knew how to serve cups of tea and coffee, by the way, that's his own quotation, said, you know what? I don't believe this. I believe that Indians have the resources, have the ability, have the goodwill to support children. And people say, are you crazy? The only development money you get is from overseas, or the government, or the Muslim. He said, no, I'm going to take from either. I am going to make sure that all of us get together and contribute. And in that sense, it was just an idea of saying, I want to do something about this. I am not going to sit. So he had, the vision that was actually created was, and this is, to my mind, what differentiates. And for me, when I had to choose I wanted to join the NGO sector. This is what differentiated this organization. Look at it, they didn't write me off. Most NGOs will talk only about their target audience. But this vision included all of us. So while it talks about a child, every child who is happy, healthy and creative. Why happy, healthy and creative? Because as the outcome of getting her rights, her or his rights. But yet whose rights are protected and honored in a society that is built on the respect of dignity, justice and equity. So it is about changing all of us. And to me, when I saw this, you know, one of the trigger thoughts had been that, isn't there a disassociation between these two Indias? So there's this one India which is sort of eating Mars bars and, you know, running around buying Zara clothes or whatever. And then there's this one India where people go to sleep hungry. You know, who often sort of right next to you, right? Orissa is full of people who go to sleep having boiled grass so that they tell themselves they're eating something. It's very disassociated, really. It's like, how do these two coexist? You know, and this was an organization that actually says we must bridge these. We have to be one coherent society. We cannot have this sort of difference. It's not okay. And really about saying that children have to, you know, I can't just say, "Theek hai, abhi what to do," you know, he was born there, I was born here, and let's carry on. And so in so many ways, I've chosen some of his quotations. He said a lot of, you know, of course, we laugh and we say, you know, Ripon died, so we could take out his quotations, which is good. You know, the subsequent CEOs are crying, you know, quotations. You know, but amazing that some of the things that he said and the way we are able to sort of use them now. But however unseemingly unsurmountable. You know, a country that was poor, at that time, poverty levels were 70%, 70 to 80% were lived below poverty line. Yet had the money and resources to start work. Yet had numbers of crazy people who came with ideas that were crazy, right? I'm going to release children from labor. You know, I think teacher training is important. And these ideas needed funding. They needed money. But nobody was going to give them money unless, you know, you guys have a familiarity with the angel investor. So, CRY became the angel investor of children's work in this country. So we funded the first teachers training ever. Otherwise people used to say, teacher is trained, you know, why does he need further training? Why would I change methodology to work with different communities? And the realization that when you worked with different communities, you needed completely different learning methodologies. You know, the way a tribal child learns in Kerala is very different from the way a tribal child learns even in Jharkhand. It's very different. Every model is different and is worth exploring. And we knew that, you know, 6 out of 10 ideas will fail. But it's all right. We're going to have to do this unless, you know, we will create nothing new. We will keep doing what the West tells us. So there are development experts sitting there. They decide, okay, microfinance is the new thing. Let us give everybody chota loans and they will all buy cows and we will live happily forever after. And you know, I was recently talking to the father of microfinance in India and he was telling me, he said, I learned too much further when I evaluated my work 5 years later. And only 4% of the people I had supported had better lives. 50% of them had worse lives because I actually saddled them with debt. Because what happened in reality to that cow? Cow को veterinary care चाहिए, cow को fodder चाहिए, पानी चाहिए, right? None of that was there. Cow मर गई. Now I have a debt, which in true, you know, in Indian, what I call the whole urban problem of khudgarzi. The rural poor have khudgarzi. They pay bad debts, or else they kill themselves. So very lovely idea, seemed to work beautifully in Bangladesh and whatever. Didn't work. Unless you surrounded it with the services that were required. So if you surrounded it with the other things, then it would work. So really, if you want to create change, you're going to have to get more and more people together. Cry alone, for example, if we go into the community, there's no way we're going to make the change possible. We're going to have to find a water NGO to align with. We're going to have to find a livelihood NGO, right? Because I just have to go and work on children. Not happening. Unless we can look at everything that affects and needs to be changed. And of course, the power of collective action, I don't know if even meant it like this, but of course, from what I hear of him, when you asked him, did you think I would be so big? He said, no, much, much bigger. This is very small. Still not doing enough. I remember we were in the initial years, we were tending to make him into a little dinky. We would put pictures and we would do themes of his death, day and stuff like that. Until I remember one of the senior people who had worked very closely with him. She stood up and she was this very interesting person who had, spoke no English. English was like basically words strung together. People came out of conversations and said we could understand nothing. Yet she was our most successful fundraiser ever because of just the sheer heart. And then she came up and someone gave her the mic, looked at all of us and she said, like that over there, if Rippon had seen sitting there like this, he would have said, get back to work. So that ended all the deification and rituals. We have never since wasted more than 1 minute. We have 1 minute silence and that's it. Or really saying, how do you bring people together? How do you create a movement of people who do more and more and more? And that is really how change will happen. So for each of us, the challenge is not just how to change my life, but how to be a catalyst for getting others to do so as well. Whether it's by being an inspiration or by just triggering it off. Sometimes a conversation. You talk to a lot of people, I'm sure all of you, if I talk to each one of you, there will have been a moment. There will have been something somebody said that may not even, that person also may not know, had such a sort of huge impact on me. So what we do therefore, like I said, as an organization, is actually work with everybody. So we work with the media and say, you know what, you can contribute by writing about children's issues. Because there's not enough media space for serious issues. We want things to be sort of a little entertaining. As this editor said, the Hindu editor told me, he said, it's very sad. You give me a serious story, I'll put it on page 8. You give me a story of a dramatic story of a child who was hung and quartered and flamed, it'll be on page 1. So we sometimes laugh and say movements are built on, the women's movement says that when there are a death, a gruesome death, you build sometimes things only on bodies. It's truly sad. But therefore, as the media can help, volunteers can help, young people in schools can help. There is nothing that we believe that different sort of sets of people cannot contribute to this country. As our survival is rooted in interdependence, we have to share our lives. I think I talked a fair bit about this. We build understanding and expertise on children and develop means to bring in their voices. So one of the things that we sort of worked with that we realized is when you work with children, it's very easy to act on behalf of them. It's very easy to assume this is what they need. But how do you actually hear them and what they need? I remember we were doing advocacy for the right to education and we had this complicated list of, saying, ye hona chahiye, wo hona chahiye, teacher training honi chahiye. And we asked children, we had a session with children. And children came and they had not understood all this Adam Shiksha. And I remember they basically said, we need a blackboard. Most of us don't have a blackboard. teacher who teaches. You know, and that's it. Two things. I want a teacher who teaches and I want a blackboard. And we were okay. We had all this jargon in place. You know, you need this, you need that. So, you know, when people tell me, oh, I'm going to judge a school on the basis of whether they have audio, video equipment or they have the latest iPad, I'm like, okay. Maybe the iPad is the blackboard equivalent, but really, you need a teacher and you need a blackboard. That's what our children told us. Because so often their teachers don't teach them. They go there and they knit, famously, or they say, ठीक है, मतलब तुम दलित हो, तुम साफ कर दो, तुम X हो, तुम वो कर दो, yeah. So and very often they are also insensitive. So you know, people of my generation keep saying, we went to government schools were great, why can't they be great now? But you know, one of the points is, and this is really interesting, people like us went to government schools and our parents went and made sure the schools function. Today the people going to government schools are so underprivileged. They are so much first generation learners that their parents can't put pressure. And therefore the schools in a sense have to deteriorate. Because really, how do you, it's far more complex to teach a child who comes in the morning because he was up the whole night because his alcoholic father was threatening to kill his mother. Now, is he going to sleep or is he going to learn? You know, it's a very different challenge. You need very different sensitization and training to work with children like that. So how do you actually build? And I think to me this is really the most powerful thought for all of us. It has been for me. Every person is a resource. I cannot walk into a room and say, you know what, these guys are going to be all blasé. Or these guys are just looking for big time corporate careers. This is something I cannot do. I do not do. Because to me, each person has something they're going to be able to do. And this, frankly, I learned in crime. You know, I was a fairly sort of cynical, you know, saying, lag to raha hai acha, usme kuch hoga. But you know, sometimes it's the other way around. It looks bad, but it's got a glimmer of hope. You walk into a corporate office and you find amazing people who say, okay, now tell me, how do I get you some money? You know, this friend who was a brand manager and he said, I have no permission to give you any money. I will find it. So he ran some silly competition and got children to submit art and something and he got 7 lakhs. You know, it was all that individual. It was all, in the end, it is about what you believe in the best in people. You know, I met the same people in a situation when they are interacting with craft and the same people interacting in another space and you suddenly realize, oh my God, they can be very different. You know, and I think that is what we all need to sort of believe in. Otherwise, the volunteers just to get, you know, 2-4 lakh log in a mahina and just have these kind of crazy demands. I can volunteer between 2 and 3 on Saturday afternoon in the garage of my building. Yeah, today we have to turn away people. You know, we have floods of young people coming and saying, I want to do something. So people argue with me and say, you know, it's because they want to get entry in universities abroad. I say, yes, some of them do. And do you know how amazingly honest we are about it? And I have an equal number of people coming back to me at the end of that 2-3 months stint and say, you know, ma'am, that's why I came. But now I'm like, okay, I'm glad I did this. You know, so I think the gist of what I'm saying is really to say, you know, there is no limit to human potential or endeavor or ability to change. I could be that cynical person who comes and says, boss, you know, I'm just going to, I want a certificate. तो हार्वर्ड में अप्लाई करने का है, मेरे को चाहिए. No, fine. And we have learned to say fine. If that's what you want, come. But work. I'll not give you a certificate for not working. You come and work, and let's see what happens. And then they discover, like so many others discover. When I joined, I keep thinking of my arrogant little brat who walked in and said, I am corporate child. I know so much about HR. I will contribute to children. And today, if you ask me, I do not know how to pay back this debt to this organization for what it has done to me. As a human being, as a professional, not as a person. Of course, I mean, as a person is expected, right? I mean, you all say, of course, you get to feel good with like Mother Teresa and so on. But it's not that at all. It is how much I've grown as a professional, how much I've learned about what can be done in the innumerable ways HR can be practiced. You know, the challenges that are so different when you're dealing with a set of people who are only there because they want to be is very different. Right? They are not there for the money. Money is a 20% of their emotional contract with you. So people often say, in Pride there's a lot of space for people to say, my child is ill, can I, miss 2 hours of this meeting? And people tell me, why do you allow it? And I'm often saying, but that's the nature of the contract. I have to be able to work with it. But eventually my learning is that people will themselves say, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be here. But if you don't give that space and you say, no, this is a job, sorry, this is not. Yeah, for most people, they're not doing this because they want to do that. So that's the story. The 50 rupees, 60. In 2014, we had over a lakh. Actually, a lakh is our typically CRY conservative number. We are very careful about what we say. We never show off about, a lot of people just throw numbers and gets me very upset. We have supported over 2 million children till date, but we never make that number bigger because you realize we fund projects repetitively. So like a lot of funding happens in tranches. The 3-year projects, 2-year projects. CRY's there is, I will fund you till you need me. So we have funded or supported the same children for 15 years. And therefore the numbers never look big. And I don't think they should, really. Because that means that I haven't done my job at all. I've gone in, counted, ticked the boxes and said, इतने बच्चों को पढ़ना लिखना सिखा दिया, literacy हो गया, आगे चलो. Let us do the next thing. But actually say, how do we change their lives? We currently have 168 projects, but over our lifespan we must have supported closer to 500, 400, 500 projects. We work in 23 states. And while the person who helped me with this wrote 180 employees very proudly, what I'm prouder of is, when I joined CRY in 94, it was 180 people. And it's still 180 people. But those 180 people do completely different jobs from what they did then. So we reach around, our aim is to reach around 1 million children. And strategically, that is how we want to go. We want to stay 1 million children for the next 10 years, but not growing the number of children. Because we believe we want to do the work and really ensure that we change their lives. And we also don't want to, kill the organization and its fundraising saying, you know what, we should be 20 times. The 20 times is coming through policy change. So our investment is into saying, for example, just the simple right to education, you should see the gains it's given us. I look at every quarter report and I'm sometimes, there's someone lie to me. This looks like an annual report. So many classrooms open. So many teachers have come on board. So many, why? Because we could change that policy. So really we are saying that we will redirect a lot of our energy to changing policy. So like here when we work in Jharkhand, we work with local government. We're working at reviving the schools, the hospitals, the work that anyway needs to be running, right? And how do you work at sort of reviving them and making sure that they function? Because if that doctor comes, I can fly 30 doctors 30 times a year. It's never going to be the same thing as having that doctor there every day. लगाing that vaccination, making sure that Tika happens, making sure that every day midday meal is given to every pregnant woman, every little child. So these are some of the long-term goals for the next 10 years. Some of the things that we have visualized about who we want to be as an organization. So I've now really moved into pride territory, as you can see, much more than say, how do different people live their lives. So the first thing is to really say you build a dynamic and capable employee base. There's really high standards of accountability. Why accountability? Nice words, nice to say, why are you saying them, how are you going to action them. The point is, think about it. You're an NGO, you do not have shareholders. You have nobody who asks you every year, boss, dividend kitna? Yeah? Who holds you accountable? Your stakeholder is a child. The child barely has a voice. How is she going to hold you accountable? So unless you set for yourselves the highest standards of accountability for yourself, and this was a thinking that we began in 98 and then put in place. So in CRY, many people join us and say, bloody hell, I was in the corporate sector, I had an easier performance management process than you have here in CRY. Every moment, every act, we attempt to measure. We attempt to say to ourselves, do I do this with sincerity? Can I be held accountable? I have to be. Because lives are at stake here. It's not, whatever. One of my fundraisers said to me, she come from FMCG. So she said, earlier, so we were chatting and she was saying, I don't know, people keep saying to me at home that, oh, you must be relaxed now. Now you work for an NGO, so nice, She's like, how do I tell them that was more relaxed day? Because there, if I didn't sell my sales up, I didn't get some increment. Some shareholder didn't make money. Somebody got angry. So, who cares? Or some silly shareholder sitting in US. But here, if I don't make my money, I don't make my income, a child's life is affected. It is a really heavy burden to carry. We find that for our fundraising people, we have to constantly work with them, to honor everything and say it's okay. Even a good meeting was worth it. Even if you didn't get the check, it's very difficult to carry this, right? Because if I fail, there are 168 organizations, a million children, and the way you work with employees really has to change. And we've had huge arguments about accountability, I can tell you. This whole concept of measurement in the social sector is very, you can imagine, very fraught. People say, no, such a noble purpose. Why should we measure? Change is slow. You never know what happens. But I think we've held to it saying it's not true. Even if the ultimate change is slow, the process can be measured. Your outcomes along the way can be measured. So we have really put our noses to creating a system that works for us. That actually says, did that child's life get impacted or not? Otherwise I can do, I'm sure many of you worked. So doing mindless process is very easy, I can keep doing and not really ask myself if anything got impacted or changed. I done my visit, I tick. But did what you set out to do, did that happen? So for the poor fundraisers, it's very simple, Either I made my money or I didn't make my money. But for everyone else in CRY, who work with volunteers, who work with communication, it's far more difficult to come up with measurable things that I can hold myself to. So for me, for example, I always say, is my leadership working or not working? Am I creating future leaders to CRY or not? If I'm not, then I'm not doing my job, really. Anyone could run the operation. That's not a big deal. But actually, so it's very different when you sort of find a way to fine-tune your own. I think the second big one is my by implementing quality child-centered programs? Are you asking yourself that question constantly? Is the child going to be impacted? It's easy now. You would be surprised by how easy it is to lose sight of that. Because, for example, you could be fighting for ration cards for the family. And that could become the win, right? But did the food come in? Did it get equally shared between girl and boy? Did it actually go to the children? You know, what happened? When people talk to me about cash transfers, say, why don't we just move from this PDS to cash transfer? So much easier, right? ऐसे दे दो, लोग खरीदेंगे, लोग पता क्या खरीदेंगे? दारू खरीदेंगे, लोग खरीदेंगे चीनी, तेल. There's a study out of Maharashtra which shows as incomes grew, people didn't buy more nourishing food. They got sugar and oil. Because it was seen as a sign of, yeah, I am now wealthier, I can eat healthy, nicer food. And you didn't spend it on eggs or milk for the children. You actually went and made mithai and deep fried food. It actually brought down nutrition status. So, it's so fascinating, this whole space. But when you get into the nuances of how implementation works on the ground, what different shapes it can take, from community to community to community. There will be communities who are naturally collective in nature. They will be naturally willing to come together. Then there will be communities who will not. So, for example, when you work with the urban poverty, you don't have that kind of community feeling. Because वो तो busy है, सोच रहा है कि उसका वो task है, वो उधर से आया है, वो तो बिहारी है, वो तो बंगाली है, etc., etc. And they will not come together. The same model will not work. Usually, if I went to a village and I had a contiguous community, they'd be willing to work together. So, really the challenge becomes that there is no silver bullet in development. And as you go ahead in your lives, and you will meet many people who will tell you there's a silver bullet. And you will all look for it. We all look for it. Believe me. If we crack this, everything will be fine. If I can just get children into preschool, everything will be fine. It's not. There is no. My conclusion after 20 years is that actually there are so many shades of gray. Something works somewhere, doesn't work somewhere else. Works in Bombay, doesn't work in Delhi. Works in Jamshedpur, may not work in Ranchi, believe me. So how do you actually create program becomes a huge challenge and yet make it commonly measurable across the country. Obviously by widening our support base, because we are all about creating collectives. We are about creating larger numbers of people. So, if we have a committed sense of a set of volunteers, which is about 3,000 to 4,000, it's a big number for us. We have 300 to 500,000 donors, huge number. You have communities who are coming in and joining, huge numbers. And we really believe that the future is not in these direct supporters, but it could be in, for example, how policy affects. So supposing I were to start that government school, could I would count the 20 children that worked in that village as our children. But actually the school was started for all the 100 kids of that village. So what I call the stone throwing, ripples kitne hue. What are those points at which I can actually throw stones to create larger ripples? Clearly policy change is one of them. Adult change. I can get a panchayat to act differently. I can get a simple BDO to act differently. Bureaucrats are amazing partners in change. You can either write them off, say they all corrupt and bad and are rude, or you can say, what, this guy is really powerful. If he wants to do it, he's going to change his entire history. Yeah. By ensuring financial health, like my poor professor would have said, that, oh God, talk about finances. But really, it's a big part. We have to be financially healthy. All of you, tomorrow you are my donor. You're going to question my costs. You're going to question, are we being efficient? In fact, that's a big bugbear we have in the sector. The people don't understand that we a corporate friend of mine told me, he said, how profitable is your operation? So I said, we run about 58% profitability and people scream at us. And he was like, you know what? If I run a 30% profitable operation, I get promoted. It's the standards by which you are judged are so different. People give away crores of their money to the share market and don't question what happened in those companies. But they give us $1,000 and they want to know what happened. So really financial health, having, the necessity for NGOs to invest into their own systems, to invest into having finance professionals, having HR professionals, it's huge and we tend not to do it because we are so focused on the outside, right? I would spend all my money on training. Will I really spend money on training my own people? I will tend to say bottom of the heap. If there's money left over, I'll do it. And yet we pay a very bad price for that in the long term. So I always say, that guy, for example, to my mind, is like Caesar's wife. If the law says X, I have to be X plus on everything. I will never have a shady tax shelter for my employees, ever. Because I'm sorry, I can't afford it. Tomorrow I can't have the tax man coming and saying, your employees are evading tax. Can you imagine the noise? We had funded one project a few years ago in the Gujarat earthquakes for child resource centers. Now this project ended up being one of the ones that went against the Gujarat government and came in the media and immediately cries negative, saying you gave so much money. And no one looks at, we didn't fund that, whatever he did. Right? We funded the child program. So it's very, you really need to be on the ball of this. Believe me, NGOs need finance professionals more than they need anybody. And we think we do. We think we can have, an undergraduate who knows how to write kitab. Nahi hota. By strengthening our brand, like I said, very un-NGO-like behavior. It's very clear to us. Why would anybody support me? Why would I be here? I'll be here because I think you're handling my money credibly. You're going to make sure that children's lives change. You're going to make sure there's no wastage, etc. So the brand has to communicate that. And that's something Ripon understood amazingly, right? Amazing. The way he grew Price brand, sometimes we actually are quite shy of telling people our real size. People tell us, it must be an international organization. Like, no, Indian organization. Small Indian organization. You must be a very big Indian organization. So, no, very small. We're like 30, 40, 50 crores. That's it. We're not huge. Our impact may be large. But they're small indigenous organizations. We never set out to be UNICEF. We never set out to say I will save children's lives in Africa. And if I can save children's lives in India, frankly, I'll be the happiest. I think if we can make a significant impact here, that is itself really, really big. So that's one of the downsides of the brand, sometimes looking larger. And for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's English or whatever, so it's foreign. And I think our constant endeavor to establish expertise. To say, we know children more than anybody does. What Indians do. We know the diversities because we work in so many diverse spaces. We work in tribal India, we work in the northeast, we are in the south, we're everywhere. We're in J&K. We are where the angels fear to tread. And we can be because we are Indian. In many ways, it's an easy thing, people don't suspect us of foreign hand. So we can actually go where children need us. So for example, for the next 10 years, we now mapped by the Human Development Indicators as a government data. We mapped the critical destination spaces. So we're now moving our money from the less critical to the more critical, which frankly is pretty unpopular with the corporates because these more critical always happen not to be conveniently outside their factories. This is one huge problem we're running in with corporate funding. We've never had very big corporate funding, like 6%, 8% at best. Now the CSR bill is come and people are telling us you must get more corporate funding. We're like, yeah, but you know what? We're not equipped to run, we're not willing to run work outside their factory base. This is a waste of money. So those people are already a little better. I know it's relative, but it's our job to be relative, right? It's our job to reach where we are needed the most marginalized children, the most marginalized areas. So it's an interesting cusp we are at. Because we've always done this, we've always followed what we thought was important and asked people to join us in this journey. Now we are facing this situation where people are saying, but I want to go to X and I'll give you money if you come with me. You know, and many NGOs are adapting. What do they do? So I think that is going to be, to my mind, one of the biggest challenges that we will have. That if we want more profitable, large money, it's going to take us in directions we may not be willing to go. So how do we get more nimble, more flexible? As you can imagine, in 35 years, that's also an issue sometimes. We're quite set in our ways because we are so interested in being vigilant and effective and efficient. I mean, come on, look at my model, right? I have 300,000 donors. Believe me, if one of them doesn't get his receipt on time or his tax exemption, I get a call. Madam, you told me. You know, so you have to run a really efficient operation. And sometimes when you're trying to do that, it's very difficult to innovate. So we're really facing that challenge. You know, it is our model, right? Figure that out. That's our vision. Our vision is to get more people to join. But we pay for that vision sometimes in these ways. Where it's becoming, you know, we're having to, if you want to innovate something, we have to set aside a little cell of people, incubate it within TRI, and say, go off, try that, and then, you know, come back and we figure out if we can sort of roll it up. So sometimes I laugh that we become a little bit Hindustan English. That, you know, if it doesn't sell 300,000 crores, I don't want this product. You know, and it's awful. You want to be able to sell, you know, have that product that is very niche. Because our development product, as you just heard, is very niche. You can't have one product. You have, if I have 168 projects, I probably have 168 development modules. The different things added in different places. So what is it that really drives us? I think we just always ask why. And we always believe in all of it. We really believe, I mean, the first 10 years of TRI was run by volunteers who had regular jobs, and then even they tell you stories of how they took the cards and their Zolas and their lunch break, went up to nearby offices and sold the cards. You know, to today, where is the core of TRI when I get somebody who comes and says, you know, I'm a marketing professional with 30 years of experience, I was vice president X, Y, Z. I want to volunteer. I'm like, okay. What do I do with this person? It's so tough now. Actually, it's so much tougher. Because we need people who have 9-to-5 jobs. We need them to deliver. We need them to deliver the receipts. You know, we need them to do what, you know, if I have to have actually a clean audit, I better have full-time finance professionals. I can't have people coming in and giving me airy-fairy strategy ideas and say, you know, do this. And I remember 20 years ago, we could have a bunch of students from a management institute come and give us a new idea. Today, when they come, you're yawning. Sorry, but I'm really saying sometimes, you really are yawning. Because there's nothing you're saying that's not been done before. So how do you deal with this? How do you keep that space open for people to do different things? So we find that is happening through our volunteer action. Where we are letting people free and saying, you do it. So young Ujjwal, doing IIT Kharagpur, working with all the schools in Kharagpur that were around their campus, running off, cycling. Somebody else in Bombay running a ward just for the board, saying, this is my area, this is where I live. I said, is the government school working? Is the hospital coming? Is the doctor coming? Can I do something? Because many of us will have the courage to go and walk into a municipal office and ask the question. Many of us, actually the parents will not. The people who are underprivileged will not have that courage to walk in, right? They'll say, nahi yaar, don't listen. The ironic thing about the services for the poor in this country, the poor often don't want to access them because they are re-dignified so much. And people will tell you, nurse इतनी बुरी तरह बात करती है कि मुझे नहीं जाना. वो ANM मेरे घर में नहीं आएगी क्योंकि मैं महादलित हूँ. मैं क्यों जाऊँ? I met a group of Musahar ladies in UP the other day. They were telling me, तो आई ना, तो ANM वाली, हमने उसको बोला, अगर तुम हर महीने आओगी ना तो करने दे. भाई तो टीका लेने नहीं आ रहा. तुम हर महीने आने का कमिटमेंट. They're so used to being treated, in such a way. So really it is always about saying, how do we, go forward? Believe in ourselves, believe in people,